So our first impression of Robert Ross comes from the prologue of the book, and even in this early picture of Robert Ross, he is connected with animals. So animals will become a sort of symbolic element in the text and will sort of reflect aspects of the human characters they're associated with. And I think if we think about animals as symbols, um, we'd also sort of look at them somewhat as almost childlike or innocent as well. In warfare, animals were used as objects and tools. Horses and dogs are used and treated as if they were just expendable objects. Their lives didn't matter. So this is one of the other contexts of animals in the text. There's sort of these comparisons between the soldiers and the horses that Robert sees, but both are being sort of used and exploited by this military system. And in this opening prologue, we have some information. So our first impression is that Robert has suffered greatly. And our very first sentence is also interesting. So she was standing in the middle of the railroad tracks. Her head was bowed and her right front hoof was raised as if she rested. So from that very first sentence, we don't know who the she is, right? And then the second sentence reveals that this is a horse. So even from that very first sentence, the line between humans and animals is being blurred. So Findley is doing something with that in this novel where animals and humans are tied together, symbolically connected, and Robert Ross sees himself as kind of a protector, guardian for animals and for those individuals who are vulnerable, fragile, weak, or in need of somebody to protect them. So the horse and the dog, Robert is kind of aligned or connected with them. He seems to have a sort of almost like a spiritual or a bond between them. He seems pretty beat up. He's burnt, his torn lapel, burned sleeves, face and the backs of his hands were streaked with clay and sweat. So he's obviously gone through something already. And this is the aftermath of that. So we don't know what's happened, but this is this kind of glimpse of some kind of aftermath. And then he and the horse and the dog move together in tandem. And then down the track, so this is on page 6, they rode down the track towards the road to Magdalen Wood, passing as they went the engine on the siding. When they got to the first of the cars, the horse stopped. She threw her head up and whinnied. Other horses answered from inside the car. "All right," Robert said, "then we shall all go together." Half an hour later, the 12 cars stood quite empty, and Robert was riding along the tracks behind 130 horses with a dog trotting beside them. They were on the road to Magdalen Wood by 1 a.m. This was when the moon rose red. So this is our glimpse of the controversial aspect, or at least a little part of it, of what Robert did. So the train car all lined up on the tracks and abandoned, and then all the horses are in the trailers, and he lets all of them go free. 130 horses together, freed from the train cars. So this element of, freeing the caged horses gives us a kind of indication of the symbolic nature of animals in the text. And we also have a little bit of foreshadowing about Robert's tragic end on page 7 when we have the fact that Robert was consumed by fire. People can be found in what they do. So we don't know. We do have little glimpses, fragments of the kind of man he is and what he did. And my first impression is, obviously he is somebody who cares deeply for animals, and that act of freeing those horses from their train cars would indicate to me that, he's taking pity on them. He sees them as wanting to be free, and is doing, he might be breaking the rules, but he is doing what he believes in. So he's got a sort of strong sense of moral right or wrong. And, compassion for him is paramount to, uh, the rules of, that horses belong to the army. Okay, so that's our first glimpse of the Robert Ross from the prologue. So let's take a closer look at his early. So Robert's relationship with Rowena is sort of the primary relationship of his youth. She represents innocence and his role as a guardian figure, a protector. He took care of her and her fragile body. And the association with animals is also evident in her close association with the rabbits. And Robert acts as her guardian, so when she falls, he feels guilty. She dies when she falls out of her wheelchair, and Robert wasn't there in that moment, so he blames himself. And her fragility and the way he cared for her is part of his loss of innocence, right? So in her death, he also sort of loses a piece of his childhood and the innocence that will also be taken away from him once he is in the military. So Rowena's death is this part of his rite of passage, part of his learning of the realities of life and death, and part of him growing up as well. So her death marks the shift or change in his character. And the day after she dies, he decides to enlist in the army. So it's kind of the catalyst to him taking this huge leap to become a soldier. So the way those two things are connected, I don't know, you can sort of decide in your own mind how or why he chooses to enlist after this moment, but I think it has to do with the fact that he still views himself as a guardian. He maybe feels a little bit of guilt as well, and this could be a way to punish himself by enlisting. It could also be a kind of way to serve or guard or protect somebody else in the fact that he thinks he can serve his country, and maybe there's a noble or a value that he sees in being a soldier, a protector. So together, along with this kind of loss of innocence, we see Robert losing his sister and then taking this next step to become a soldier.